Good morning, eighth graders. I'm here in North Carolina. We made it here safely, but I'm exhausted. I'm at my sister's house, which is wonderful. It's really nice to see her. So, here's what we're going to do this week. We are continuing research for our projects, but unlike last week, we're going to focus this week on graphs or graphics. So, what you'll do is first open up your document. You're going to try to find a graphic, and then we're going to comment on it. So let me show you an example of how we'll do that first. You're going to go to find a graphic. Now, I've just randomly picked this one about global temperature change, which I think I can comment on, but you might end up Googling your subject, comma, graphs, or your subject, comma, data. And you might end up doing a Google image search that might be easier, or finding a graph from inside an article and copying and pasting it. And here's how that works. So you click on your graph, you wait for it to load. And then what you're going to do is use two fingers on your trackpad, or if you have a mouse, use the right click button. And you're going to click copy image. And then you go to your document, click in the box, again, right tap or two finger tap, and you click paste. Now my computer decided that I need to install something, so instead I will do Control V. And now my graph down here looks really, really small. So you may certainly make it much bigger. Your graph can be as big as you need it to be, and you may certainly change the margins of your graph if you need to, or you may leave it small there and instead look at it in a larger format elsewhere and then just make your notes in the document separately. So here's what we'll do as we're looking at our graphs. Here's what you should, how you can go about looking at it. The first thing that you need to do is ask yourself, what do you notice? So this is a really easy question. There are no wrong answers really. And what I'm going to notice in this is first, I see a line in the middle here. I'm seeing a bunch of data points in color above and below this central line. I'm seeing the title, which is global average temperature compared to the middle of the 20th century. So the middle of the 20th century is like 1950. Now, this graph, I know from the description later, which I will get to, that they're using the middle of the century as 1950 to 1980. So you'll notice the end actually goes past 2000, meaning we're kind of in the 21st century as well. So we're comparing, I think that might be why the middle is used, as you can see, about 1950 through 1980. That's kind of our middle portion here. And what other things can I notice? Well, I'm noticing blue and I'm noticing this orangey color. And I'm guessing that that's because this is warmer and this is colder. I'm noticing numbers. I'm seeing degrees. And then I see a C right here, which tells me all the degrees are in Celsius. I'm seeing some labels. I see on the x-axis. That's a term we might need to use as we talk. I'm seeing the dates, and they're spaced out by 20 years. And then I'm seeing on my y-axis, again, another term we might need. I'm seeing some, the demarcations of temperature. So it's going by 0.25 or a quarter of a degree in Celsius. So that tells me I might need to look up how that relates to Fahrenheit, because we don't use Celsius that much in the US. I'm seeing a trend for sure. I think I noticed that it's getting hotter and hotter. That's what it looks like to me. And the author or source, you can't see it copied here, but I got it from the New York Times, and therefore I feel like it's pretty reliable. If I look down here, I can see the sources. The New York Times got it from NASA, and the anomalies shown relative to the average temperature between 1951 and 1980. So that is the caption of my graph, and those are really important for you to look at. So the next thing I'm going to look at is, what do I wonder? What questions can I ask? Well, I just asked a minute ago, what do these temperatures mean in Fahrenheit? And I can look that up really easily using Google. I will just enter 0.75 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, and then it will tell me what this means. What I wish that I knew was kind of what, like these are saying plus 75 or plus 0.75 degrees above the average. I'd really like to know what is this average temperature that they're saying from the 50s to the 80s. And so therefore, like, what are we going up and down from? I'm also going to ask why this study was done. So, kind of what is their purpose in showing this to me? I'm going to ask global average temperatures. Were these trends were those seen in a lot of different countries, or were there outlier countries that kind of threw off the average? Do you guys remember doing mean, median, and mode in math? And then sometimes you'd get like the mean being the average, but if you had like 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, and then you had like a 10, it really threw off the average. But then there's only one like weird outlier. And I'm wondering, why was it so much colder before the 40s? Like, what happened in the 40s and 50s that changed? You know what I mean? And then the next thing you're going to ask, the third thing is, what is the author trying to communicate through this graph? So this is sort of like you're asking, what's the main idea of this graph? So I know their point has something to do with global average temperatures. They're also comparing it. So I think they're trying to get across something to me about average temperatures and a trend. I think that that's really the point. And what I would infer based on the things I noticed and the questions I asked is that overall, global temperatures have been increasing relatively consistently for the last, 140 years. So, over the last 140 years, global average temperatures have pretty consistently increased by almost a whole degree Celsius. So then, now that I've established that that's what I think the main idea of that graph is, now I can ask further questions. Remember, I said in your research, one of the most powerful things you always need to be doing is asking more questions. Now, my question is, why does it matter that the global average temperature is increasing over the last 140 years by about a degree Celsius? I'm also going to ask, why has it increased that way? So those are some things I would want to write down. So I'm noticing this graph shows a trend over the last 140 years of an increase in global average temperatures by about a degree Celsius. And of course, I want to make sure that's spelled correctly. And then I'm going to ask these questions of, why is this happening? And what does it mean that temperature is increasing? So those don't directly answer these second two questions. They do both kind of answer the first question. What does this graphic show? It shows a trend over the last 140 years of an increase in global average temperatures by about a degree Celsius. Notice also that that is very specific. I didn't just say it shows global average temperature. It does show global average temperature, kind of. It actually doesn't list the actual temperatures. It's showing us increases. It's showing us comparison. It's showing us trend. And so that's what you really need to focus on in your commentary. One thing that's really bothered me about some people's work in the last couple of weeks is when you give commentary that is really vague, like, or comments that just repeat the fact. Like if you gave me a quote and then your commentary basically restated it in new terms, that doesn't really help further your research or help you keep track of your thought processes. So make sure that you're being specific and you are saying things that are new. Things that are new are helpful are comments, questions, connections, criticisms, predictions. Those things are actually going to help you with your project. So then I look at my last questions. Why is it important or significant? Well, part of that has to do with the question that I'm asking, which is why is this happening? Now, if I make some connections, I know that in that time period we mentioned where the temperature was starting to increase, I know from history about industrialization. I know about the increase in people owning cars. I know about globalization. And so I might infer that this graph kind of shows how humans have impacted the climate. It also might be important because I can look up what a 1 degree temperature increase means, and I can find research. And I know this because I've heard it on NPR recently. I can find research about why that is bad for the earth, that the global temperature is increasing. Some of you who are doing your projects about the ocean, you have already mentioned in your research about the water temperature impacting marine life, like coral fish, and how that can be problematic for people. So I'm going to add here, I think this is important because global temperature increases are bad for the planet and ecosystem. And then I might need to reference where I know that or how I know it. I'm also going to ask, is it reversible? And I wonder if this is reversible. And then what does it prove? Well, this graph might prove to me some things about humans' impact on the planet. I wonder kind of, now I'm asking another question. I'm wondering with this if I could find more information about how the planet's population grew in relationship to these numbers. Like, I wonder if there is a huge increase at the same time or if the trend looks the same, because that would prove, or at least sort of prove my theory that this increase is directly relevant to humans. And the very last thing I'm going to tell you is to always read the information around your graph. Now, I've already read to you the caption right below it, but if you get your graph from an article, you usually can read the information around it right above, right below to give you more context. It also can give you some information about whether or not the graph might be biased, whether it was paid for by a particular group of people or a company. So I'm reading from my graph, it showing the global temperature since 1880 as compared to the average global temperature for the mid 20th century years, and where else that appeared. All the degrees are in Celsius. Now, if I read more of that article, I can see another graph that I could use. And I can also see comments from other people about this graph that actually I think is really helpful. And we see in here that we're talking about a warming trend, the fourth hottest since 1880. And I'm seeing information about why that increase is negative and what it has to do with climate change. And again, that can help me with my research project. So that's our goal for this week. You're going to do one graphic today and another graphic on Wednesday. You certainly may start finding more than one today. And as always, email me if you need any help. And remember that I have office hours on Thursday at 1 p.m. Have a great day.